Hello, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Charlene Lee, and I am here joined today by Lisa Noel. And we're going to be talking about the mindful marketer, how leaders drive change by getting close to their customers. And just a little bit of a context is that I asked Lisa to come up because we've been having conversations for the past year, I would say, about how do you get to know your customers better. And a key thesis that I have is that you really need to focus not just on your customers, but really try to understand where they're moving towards and to be really thoughtful about thinking about that future customer. And Lisa is a resource that I kept turning to over and over again because people would be asking me, so how do I get to really understand my customers, especially in light of COVID? Changing so many things and causing so many distractions, pulling us in so many directions. How do we stay focused on our customers? So Lisa, thank you so much. It's so great to have you on this broadcast.
Thank you, Charlene. It's great to see you as always.
Yes. And thank you for those of us joining. If you're joining us via the live feed, please just put into the comments where you're coming from. And because the thought today is about being mindful, I thought if you could share just how do you stay present? How do you stay focused and grounded in these crazy times? So share two things: put your name, where you're coming from, and then also just how are you staying grounded? How are you staying focused on what's important? So Lisa, how do you stay focused? And you've thought a lot about being mindful. That's the topic of this today. So what's going on? What made you think about this whole topic of being a mindful marketer?
Well, I appreciate being here today very much, Charlene. And I never thought that my two worlds would collide in a positive way. You know, I've kind of been a spiritual sneak for 19 years. Where I barely even told my clients that I had a multitude of mindfulness practices. And when COVID-19 hit, and then all of the demonstrations and some of the recent political upheaval that we've all been experiencing, clients were coming to me asking, how do you stay focused and centered? What are you doing? And what would you recommend? So I turned back to my book, The Mindful Marketer, and I use that as a reference guide. And when people ask what it means, I remind people that it is not about a religion or a philosophy. It's just about living in the present moment through what I define as present, non-judgmental awareness. What's in front of me? What does it look like? And how will I react? The only thing I realize I have control over right now is my response to all of these events coming at us. So that's all I focus on is what is it happening right now and what is my response?
And so we got a good question from somebody, which is right into this. What does it mean to be grounded? How do you get to the kind of impact on this, the positive effects of it on you? What does mindfulness bring for you?
Oh, this is great because first of all, thank you, Jason from Sydney. He's asking both of us, Charlene. So I want to hear your routines and your habits first, and we can compare notes.
Yeah, one of the things I do every day is I begin my day. I have this little planner that's here, and it's a Panda planner. And one of the things it asks is, what is your affirmation? What is your focus going to be for the day? And I keep centering back onto my purpose is to help leaders thrive disruption. And then I kind of just take a minute and I figure out like, what is the focus of my day going to be? How am I going to stay focused on that thing that I want to accomplish? And then I just do the little bits of repetition. Having a cleansing breath before I start a new task. Before I have to get on the phone and talk with a difficult client, before I have to go deal with a member of my family, whatever that moment is, I take a breath, kind of center myself, clear my eyes, and focus on what I have to get done. It's so liberating in many ways.
Yes, it is. There's, it's there's a famous saying about the space between stimulus and response. And some people say that Viktor Frankl coined that term, but we're not really sure the actual source of that quote, but it's very powerful. So Jason, if you want that quote, just drop me a note and I'll be happy to send that to you through email to lisa@lisanorell.com, because it's a wonderful, simple phrase that reminds me. And Charlene, I do the same thing in terms of taking breaths. And I have, in my book, I have dozens of examples of routines, simple routines and habits that any of us can practice to stay grounded and peaceful. But I have 3 that I use pretty regularly. When I get up in the morning, I do not turn on any digital devices except my music. I turn my Pandora on to some calm music. And I have an hour in the morning of meditation, tea or coffee, and a light breakfast. And then I journal. The second thing is I journal. And then the third thing that I do that helps me in the morning getting ready for my day ahead is I set intentions before every important meeting, and I write them down in my business journal here that I keep. And so, what is the minimum best outcome I would like to achieve with this client or with this colleague? And what is the maximum best outcome? And it's not about close the deal or, generate more revenue. It's usually basic things like establish a stronger relationship with her, or resolve the crisis that she's facing with, help guide her through this crisis that her company is facing. Some very basic intentions. And that kind of keeps things very simple and somewhat organized among the chaos.
Yeah. I'm seeing some messages come here through LinkedIn also as well. Someone, Jerry says, set your sight on something of value. Be reminded where you must go to establish that focus and go somewhere of value. Without focus, you're going to find yourself going anywhere and doing anything. So focus and go. I love that. And then David says, it's a great book, Keeping Professional Outlook, The Power of Focus. I haven't seen that one, but that sounds like a great book too as well. So Lisa, talk to me about how you bring this mindfulness into the marketing space, because you are a marketer through and through. You work with a ton of marketers in the communities that you run for marketers. Tell me how you apply this to being a marketer.
Well, mindful marketing can appear in a lot of forms. One of the things we do in our peer groups, the marketing leaders peer groups, which are now nationwide, is we bring together private peer groups of leaders, mostly chief marketing officers, and they're all non-competitive in nature. So what we do first is when we start a new group, we design a purpose for the group. And before every single meeting begins, one of our members will read our group purpose. And so much like you talk about in your book, which I love, The Disruption Mindset. I love that book. You talk a lot about manifestos. So in a way, it's our manifesto. And it keeps people grounded in what our values are and how we make choices and decisions together as a group. So that's one thing, is to know our purpose. And the other thing is we spend time regularly recognizing other members who are doing extraordinary things, or just expressing our gratitude for something positive that's happening in our lives. Because as leaders of massive change, oftentimes, I know I have fallen prey to this, I can overfocus on what's broken, what needs fixing. But what is it that's working well? What are we going to keep within the organization that doesn't need to change and can be grounding for us?
And so when we think about the ways that you enter, hold on, so a little bit of echo there. So if you think about the ways that you move into thinking about the customers and trying to understand them, because I think that was one of the things that I really wanted to talk a little bit about today, especially in light of all the things that are going on with the way customers are changing and shifting. What are ways that you are thinking about how to be mindful about what's happening with customers and being present to the needs that they have?
Well, one of the first things we need to do is to watch out for too much navel gazing. Because you remember like the first month when COVID hit, all of the leaders that we work with, of course, they did the right thing. They got their leadership teams together and said, okay, we are in crisis mode. We need to focus internally on protecting our people, right? And creating safety, health and safety of our people, and keeping them engaged in a digital screen barrier world. And the second thing we need to do is preserve cash. So people went inward. And that was good for a time. And what I was saying to my clients was, your job as a leader is you've got to wear two hats simultaneously. You have to certainly manage the tactical day-to-day demands that COVID has introduced to our world. And at the same time, you have to keep asking, what's ahead? What's the new future we want to create? Because all of the best leaders I work with are facing or going through an existential crisis, an identity crisis of their organization as a result of COVID. And instead of saying, we're going back to the new normal, I'm saying there is no new normal. It's going to be a new reality. So we're shifting their thinking that, no, this is a beautiful opportunity to redesign the future, and you have to do it with your customers' help, not internal strategic planning meetings. So I put a couple of slides together, and if some of you don't see the slides or have any trouble, just drop me an email and I'd be happy to send those to you. But if you want to look at the next slide, Charlene, maybe I could share with you one model that some of my clients did to make sure they didn't lose focus of their customers.
I'm just going to build a slide all the way through so you can go at your own pace. There you go.
That would be great. That would be great. And I noticed I got another question here, but I can wait if you want to, and we'll look at it a little later.
Okay, let's do that.
So one of the things that I suggested for our clients and our peer groups, whether you're a CEO or you're a CMO, as I said, instead of just focusing on branding and messaging, which is our natural tendency as marketing leaders, I want you to focus on meaningful conversations. And so I said, the first thing to do is make sure you have a very good inventory of your marketing assets. You might even have some marketing assets that were really effective 5 years ago or 10 years ago when we faced an economic crisis. And then what I want you to do is make sure you have that list, and then take a look at your 60-day customer priorities. So what I did, the first thing when COVID hit is I scheduled about 70 appointments with clients, past clients, and colleagues. And I only asked 2 questions. I asked, what are your biggest challenges right now? And how can I help? Now, I know that sounds really simple, but you would be shocked at how many of our CMOs do not have direct contact with customers. They have to be filtered, especially in the B2B world. They're filtered through the sales team. So they're getting secondhand information or hiding behind survey systems, online surveys. And that's not what we're talking about here. This is actually connecting with your customers and asking those questions to uncover those priorities. And then what we do is we say, okay, based on those priorities, what are some marketing assets that could truly have an impact and help your clients or customers address those problems right now? And then put them into buckets where there are some urgent needs, maybe there are some medium-term needs, and then there could be some marketing assets or offers that it is time to jettison. They've just outlived their shelf life. I'm on a board of a nonprofit, and we have like 10 or 15 programs that we are funding and managing. And I raised my hand and said, I hate to be the Debbie Downer here, but we need to jettison some of these. They're not strategic, and they're not generating the kind of recurring revenue that we need to keep this nonprofit alive. I mean, we got to have those hard conversations and give up some of our sacred cows. So, and then what our best clients are doing is they're looking at this continuity plan every 15 to 30 days as we continue to see how COVID takes its course. So you might want to just show what I mean by the marketing assets, or take questions or whatever.
Yeah, I just want to dig a little bit deeper into this, because I think one of the hardest things right now is there are so many things going on. And what I've been working with leaders on is, what are your priorities? What are your priorities? What are your priorities? And again, to your biggest point here, the tendency is to stare internally to get that sense of what is a priority from just internal sources, rather than looking to customers and the external areas. Because I think that part of it is so important to be able to focus and say, how do we determine what are the things to focus on? And that list isn't going to come from, again, the belly button staring. It's going to come from your customers giving you insight into that. I just love that.
Yes, it's just too easy to get really internal and focused. I mean, just look at how I just look at myself. I live on my own, and when I know I'm in trouble and I've been at home too long, navel gazing, when I'm starting to have conversations with my cat. So, I have to get out. I have to talk to the neighbors and go out in my garden, and I do physically distant hiking trips with my clients. We go out hiking on the local trail, and just so I can catch up with them and have some human connection.
Right. And I'm getting some feedback from David saying that meaningful conversations to create values, loving that idea. That
Thank
it's
you, David.
Not just surveys and things, but it's like deep conversations. I was on a conversation with Terry Jackson, who I think also from NG100, and he was saying, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, be genuinely interested in what other people are doing and saying. So I think that meaningful conversation has a lot of resonance.
Yes.
You want to go on and talk a little bit more about this, finish it up, and then we'll come back to a question from Jason about leadership and qualities, because I want to make sure we get all this rich content that you have in here. I'm going to go on to the next slide.
That would be great.
Have you just talk a little bit about, I saw this and tell me what you're talking about here, on and off buttons. So what's going on here with this?
Yes, well, credit goes to another member of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Program, who runs a coaching firm called Horizon Point, and she's she's a psychologist, and this really opened my eyes. She said, if we don't maintain some kind of steady balance with our brains, which are either on or off, if we are constantly just using that part of our brain that is about short-term thinking, narrow focus, hyper-vigilant, tactical, I'm watching the news 5 hours a day, constantly reading articles about COVID or Black Lives Matter or whatever. If I'm constantly looking through that lens, I'm not able to truly be the leader that I have the potential to be. And worse, I don't know where our company really is going, so I cannot design the future. So it's a constant dance between the on button of hypervigilance, always connected, to this blue sky off button of connecting the dots, having a longer term perspective, and dancing in the place of what is next and what do I want to create. I told you earlier when we were in the green room, thank goodness I took a mental health day yesterday, and I sent 3 emails all day and read a big stack of the New York Times and sat outside and smelled the flowers. It was fantastic. So I'm refreshed and ready for what's ahead.
I just feel so much refreshed just even hearing about your mental health day, Lisa. I think we, especially in these times with COVID, we are just on all the time, and we don't literally know what day it is because every day blends into the next. So this is great knowledge about making sure we're taking that time to be off. Some of the research I did for the disruption mindset, I talked to these disruptors and I asked them, how much time are you spending thinking about the future, thinking about these big picture issues versus that day-to-day operational aspect of things? And they said about 50% of my time. And that struck me as so much. And the response typically was, well, I got other people on my team to focus on those sort of operational things. They do a great job. I shouldn't be looking over their shoulder. I need to do the job that only I can do. These big picture, innovative, looking at the patterns, thinking, and bringing in lots of different voices. So this really resonates with me.
Yes, it does for me too, and it's refreshing. I have a client up in New England, works with a multi-billion-dollar financial services firm, and they're a CMO. And the reason they've only been in their position for 7 months, and they did a phenomenal job the minute they started that new role. She went in, she found the low-hanging fruit. What were the short-term emergencies in marketing that needed to be addressed, took care of them. But while she was doing it, she was looking around. What's next? What could this company become a year from now? And one of the things she uncovered was, wow, we're really operationally efficient. But in order for us to be competitive and distinctive in our field, we need to be customer intimate. We need to really change the way we treat our customers and spend more time talking about our customers and helping them, having them inform our strategic decisions. And so now she's being viewed more like, the advisor to the CEO versus strictly a marketing services provider. And that is a huge win for her in her ability to balance those two things.
I just want to touch on Jason's question, and then I want to finish up the other kind of prepared comments you had. What are some of the great qualities that a leader or a leadership team should have? Name a couple. He'd love to have 5. I don't know if we have time for 5, but what are the things that came up for you from that discussion? Like, what makes a great leader, especially in this time?
I look at the leaders who model, I look back at Gandhi and what he said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So how do those leaders show up every day? What behaviors are they modeling? And I would say, look at people who have trouble modeling behaviors. If you want to apply Janussi thinking to this, just look at the unraveling of the organization formerly known as CrossFit, and how all of this, these tweets that the CEO sent out were so tone deaf and so insensitive during this political time. And the boxes, the gyms are now defecting in droves from the brand. They're stopped being their franchise payments because they said, we don't align with that leader. He writes a memo and says, we're concerned about the human inequities and racism, but then he jokes about it like it's a joke. And people said, that's not us. That's not how we believe in people. So, it's good to also look at what kind of leaders you don't want to be. So I want to flip the question a little bit there. What I will say is the leaders that inspire me, so many of my clients they're passionate about the vision and the mission of their organizations. They're truth tellers. They can be truth tellers in compassionate ways. And I think they're pragmatic optimists. I stole that, Charlene, from Marshall Goldsmith, but it really fits me. It's like, I'm willing to tell the truth and I am hopeful for the future at the same time. I'm not a Pollyanna. So those are 3 qualities. I don't know if we have time for 5. And I invite people, if you want to learn more about great leaders, Charlene, your book is filled with great examples. I have 40 or 50 examples in my book, The Mindful Marketer. So there might be some there that also would inspire you.
Yeah, I thank you, Lisa, for that. And I love the way that you think about the pragmatic aspect of this. From my point of view, leaders are setting a powerful ambition, an aspirational vision of what could be, because that's what leaders do, is they create change. And what Gandhi did is change, be the change you want to be. Well, here's the change. They define it really clearly and in vivid colors. But they also establish trusts with the people who they're going to inspire and to follow them. They create movements to create that big, huge change. And they do that by practicing tremendous authenticity, humility, vulnerability, empathy, all these things that we associate now with powerful leaders. And I think the third thing is this pragmatism. I call it the realist optimist. So I love the optimism that comes with change, but darn it, we got to get work done. So let's not keep our heads up in the clouds, and let's focus on things. In that focus, that Warren Buffett says that the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people focus on just a few things and rarely do anything else. We just
Yes.
focus on one thing and that's it.
Absolutely. And Charlene, when I'm advising my clients and, if I'm coaching them or they're part of our peer groups or I'm consulting, anytime I see a strategic plan or even a short-term plan with more than 3 or 4 priorities, I bring out my red pen and I say, all right, which ones are you going to get rid of? Because humans can only manage 3 to 4 of these priorities at a given time. So this is not a time to overdo. I love open water swimming, and I view this time a lot like the way I view how I train for open water swim races, where it's about active recovery. It's not that active recovery happens when you're done with some really intense swimming, like right after a race. I'm coming into the finish line. The first thing I do when I finish hydrating is I go back in the water and I swim for 10 minutes and just swim nice and slow and let my muscles stretch and rest a little bit. So at this time right now, if we're past some of the triage, we have to look at how can I practice active recovery so that those on-off buttons are balanced.
I love that idea. I oftentimes use the analogy of sports, and I love the fact that you do open water swimming. That's very cool. So,
I miss it.
Do this.
I miss it so much right now.
And if you think about what it is, when we're dealing with disruption in leadership, we're having to climb these steep climbs, and people talk about change fatigue, right? And the problem is that people go through this climb and they never go back to a normal or some place where they can do the active recovery. It doesn't mean that you stop. It doesn't mean that you're not in shape and you're not staying toned and ready to go into action, but you're giving yourself a pause. And people who are running marathons, who do distance with any kind of sports, there's surges and then pauses, surges and pauses. And each time you're trying to reach higher heights, further distances, greater strength with each iteration of that. But you can't do that if you're just spending all the time. So I think maybe we should add to that list of what really successful leaders do is they build in recovery times for their teams. They sense when their teams are tired and need to have recovery times. This is the thing I found with disruptive organizations. They go through those active recovery periods very, very quickly. I talked to one organization and they said, yeah, we're really tired. We have a lot of change fatigue. We went through this huge change and we're still recovering from it. So I asked them, when was this? When did you do this? They go, oh, it's 2 years ago. And I went, 2 years is probably too long of a time because your customers are running away from you. We need to shorten that recovery time. So we focus a lot, not so much on climbing the heights, but how do you recover and sustain yourself in your organization?
Yes.
I want to be aware of the time. Was there anything else that you wanted to share from the great slides that you have? And we'd also like to connect people with you and where they can find you too as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, what I'm sharing with you today, typically I conduct 75-minute to 2-hour virtual sessions with my clients. So I know we're doing the speed reading version. You can send me an email to lisa@lisanorell.com. I can send you the slides, the PDF. I've got, if you want to go ahead, one more page there, I can show you everyone that there is a process behind this. There is a matrix you can receive if you want to just use it as a template. Great time, as we're in that active recovery phase to take stock of your marketing assets. Start resurrecting those that you can dust off and reuse. And then based on those assets, if you go to the next page, those are just examples, account-based marketing, lead gen systems, webinar series. What I really invite people to do is to get rigorous about what are the customer issues based on, how we segment our customer base, including partners, employees, and shareholders. That we can create a new initiative, a new message. We can use some of our marketing assets. Which ones can we delay that maybe we had on track but aren't as relevant right now during this COVID time? And then, yes, which ones do we have to jettison? Because, they're just not addressing important issues right now for our ideal customers. And I guess we could add one more layer to this, Charlene, if we could be so bold, which is if we are in active recovery right now, where maybe we don't have the same amount of revenue coming in or same volume of customer opportunities, maybe this is also a good time to look at what are some burning issues that our future customers are facing. You know, is this a new time to pursue new opportunities with new customer audiences?
You know, I think, frankly, this is a fantastic time to be at least looking. You don't have to necessarily jump, but I really advise organizations to question everything, test all the assumptions that you used to hold true, because they may still hold true, but unless you look and you ask, it may not hold true, in which case you're going to be left behind, assuming the wrong things about the way the market and your customers are working. So yes. I love this list. I love this list because it says these are the things to focus on. And sure, you have these other things, but either pause or just get rid of them because they're no longer relevant. I think we tend to hang on to the things that we know and are comfortable with and frankly have fallen in love with because they worked so well in the past, but they're not relevant anymore.
Yeah, and I want to remind people, you know, digital marketing has been like the darling of the marketing industry for so long. And I know some of us make a living on digital marketing. I do want to remind people that, you know, the author Jonah Berger did some research around this, and only 7 to 10% of all of your referrals based on his research come from social media marketing. So, you know, that's why these human to human conversations, just picking up you're setting up a Zoom room and talking to your customers and having real conversations can make a huge difference.
Yes. And Jason has stolen my last question from me. He is asking, so what's the one piece of advice that you would give everybody today? How do we move forward from this conversation? One takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Practice extreme self-care. Really ask yourself, what is important to me right now in my life? And am I serving that purpose? Am I honoring those things in my life? I have 2 clients who actually laid off all their people and continued their business as a solopreneur because they said, hiring employees and running an office and a company is not really that important to me anymore. And I honor them for that. And there are a few other examples of that have happened in my client base. And I think this is a wonderful time for people to restore and renew their soul and pursue the things that give them joy and that bring life to those whom they love.
So well said, Lisa. Thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, the expertise that you bring into this space, and most importantly, for your wonderful soul and empathy for us all in this really trying time. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you.
It's been wonderful to be here, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Soon, very soon. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You can find Lisa at lisanoel.com. You email her and stay in touch with her at lisa@lisanoel.com. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.